"This is not personal, Elena. This is protocol." Malcolm Voss said it while a pregnant maid knelt in the rain with her apron soaked through. One hand pressed to her stomach and the other locked around a torn yellow envelope. A hospital tag slipped halfway out of the plastic seam. The security camera above the gate blinked red, recording everything and somehow seeing nothing. Behind the iron bars, no one moved until the black SUV stopped and the Mafia boss looked up. 3 hours earlier, Elena Harper had been polishing wine glasses in the west dining room, turning each stem slowly under the chandelier light to catch fingerprints the rich never noticed they left behind. Her back ached in a deep, low way that made her pause between glasses, but she did not sit. Sitting invited questions. Questions invited judgment. Judgment invited dismissal. In houses like Dante Moretti's, a woman like her learned to become useful before anyone remembered she was human. Her navy maid's dress pulled tight across her stomach now, the baby rounding her into something no apron could hide. The other maids had stopped asking how far along she was. They only looked, then looked away, as if pregnancy were contagious when it belonged to someone with hourly wages. Elena counted details the way other people counted prayers. The scratch on the silver tray near table 12. The lemon oil smell on the stair rail. The fact that Malcolm Voss had walked past the locked records room twice before dinner service. Once with no folder. Once with a black folder under his arm and his cuff hiding a keycard that did not belong to household compliance. She had seen it because people like Malcolm never watched the help. They watched doors, signatures, men with power. They did not watch the woman refilling their water. In her apron pocket, wrapped in a clean napkin, was the old phone her dead husband had left her. Dead battery, cracked screen, heavier than any secret should have been. Inside her locker, sealed in a waterproof yellow envelope, were the hospital tag, a diner receipt, a key card, and the last pieces of a truth Miles Harper had died trying to deliver. At 8:03, Malcolm found her at the staff lockers. He did not raise his voice. That was what made him terrifying. He smiled like a man correcting a scheduling error. "Elena, you have created a security concern." 2 guards stood behind him. One held her small suitcase. The other held her coat, already searched. "Mr. Moretti has no tolerance for internal theft." Elena felt the baby shift under her palm. "Then let me speak to him." Malcolm's eyes moved from her stomach to her face with gentle disgust dressed as concern. "In your condition, I would advise against making this more embarrassing." The first guard took her elbow. She almost said, "I'm sorry." The words rose automatically, old and obedient, but she swallowed them. Instead, she twisted just enough to grab the yellow envelope from her locker before the second guard could reach it. That was when Malcolm's smile disappeared. 10 minutes later, rain struck her face so hard it felt personal. Her suitcase burst open on the wet stone. White uniforms spilled into the gutter. Someone laughed, then stopped when she looked up. Elena did not beg. She crawled one knee forward, caught the yellow envelope before it slid toward the drain, and held it against her chest. Beyond the gate, headlights cut through the rain. Dante Moretti's SUV rolled to a stop. Malcolm straightened his tie beneath the awning. "Unfortunate timing," he murmured. Dante watched through black glass as Elena let her umbrella blow into the street but kept the envelope. His gaze dropped to the torn corner, to the hospital tag, to the time printed in blue ink. Then he spoke 2 words, quiet enough that only his driver heard them. "Open it." The gate began to move, and the small plastic hospital tag hanging from the envelope showed a discharge time that was 7 minutes after Miles Harper was supposed to be dead. The gate opened slowly, iron dragging against its track with a sound like a verdict being reconsidered. Elena stayed on one knee in the rain, the yellow envelope pressed so hard to her chest that the torn corner bent under her fingers. Dante Moretti stepped out beneath no umbrella. Water darkened the shoulders of his black coat, but no one reached to cover him. Men like him did not need protection from weather. They needed protection from lies. Malcolm Voss moved first, smooth as a closing door. "Mr. Moretti, I apologize for the disturbance." Ms. Harper was removed under standard compliance procedure. He said her name like paperwork. Not woman, not mother, not witness. Elena lowered her eyes for 1 second, not in shame, but to look at the hospital tag again. 7 minutes. That was the number she held on to while the rain ran cold down her neck. Dante's gaze moved from Malcolm's dry shoes to Elena's split suitcase, then to the uniforms floating in muddy water near the curb. Procedure, he said. One word. Soft enough to be mistaken for agreement. Malcolm relaxed by half an inch. That half inch was the first mistake. Yes, sir. We discovered unauthorized materials in her possession. Given her recent emotional volatility, I felt it best to avoid alarming the household. A few staff members stood under the service awning, pretending not to stare. A driver looked away. A night maid held a damp towel in both hands and twisted it until water dripped onto her shoes. Somewhere behind the kitchen wall, the dishwasher kept running, steady and stupid, as if ordinary things had not just watched a pregnant woman thrown into a storm. Elena lifted her chin. I didn't steal anything. Her voice shook, but it did not break. Malcolm smiled with the patience of a man explaining rules to someone beneath them. Elena, this is exactly the kind of escalation we discussed. Dante looked at her then. Not kindly, not warmly, precisely. What time were you fired? She swallowed rainwater and fear. 8:17 on the form. Malcolm's mouth tightened. Approximately. Elena's fingers shifted on the envelope. But they took my badge at 8:03. I know because the kitchen clock was still blinking from the power flicker. It resets 2 minutes slow. Silence spread under the awning. Dante did not turn his head. Badge. One guard stepped forward and handed over the ruined plastic card. The hole punched through it was clean. New. Dante held it under the gate light. Then he looked past Malcolm toward the small black dome camera above the service entrance. Footage. Malcolm's smile returned thinner now. Of course, though camera 4 suffered a weather interruption around that time. I've already filed a maintenance note. Elena felt the baby move again, a small pressure against her palm, as if even he had heard the lie. Camera 4 doesn't face the lockers, she said quietly. Camera 2 does, unless someone switched the feed again. Malcolm turned his head slowly. Again, the word was wrapped in silk and poison.
Careful, Elena.
Stress can confuse memory. Dante took out his phone, photographed the badge, the hospital tag, the envelope corner, and the timestamp on Malcolm's termination form. He asked only one more question. Who filed the form? Malcolm answered too quickly. Compliance office. Dante glanced at the paper. At 7:56. No one breathed. Elena looked down at the yellow envelope in her hands and saw, through the ripped plastic seam, a coffee receipt she had forgotten was there. Ink blurred but still readable. 2 black coffees, 1 blueberry muffin, 10:58 p.m. The night Miles supposedly died alone. The receipt did not tremble. Elena did. That was the first thing Dante seemed to notice as he looked from the blurred ink to her rain-soaked hands. The paper was small enough to be dismissed as trash, the kind of thing a maid would find under a chair and throw away without thinking. But Elena had kept it for 7 months inside a yellow envelope because Miles had taught her that lies liked big rooms and truth usually hid in pockets. Malcolm gave a quiet laugh. Not cruel enough to be called cruel, not kind enough to be mercy. A coffee receipt proves nothing, Mr. Moretti. People buy coffee. Grieving wives build stories around ordinary things. Elena closed her fingers around the receipt before the rain could finish ruining the ink. He hated blueberry muffins, she said. Her voice was low, almost swallowed by the water dripping from the gate. Malcolm blinked once. Dante's eyes moved to her. Elena did not look at Malcolm. She looked at the receipt, because the receipt had never called her dramatic, never told her pregnancy made her confused, never smiled while taking away her badge. Miles was allergic to blueberries. Not enough to die, but enough that his throat would swell if he ate one. He bought that muffin for someone else. For the first time, the silence did not belong to Malcolm. It belonged to her. They brought her inside through the service entrance, not the front hall. That choice said everything. The marble floors were too clean, the air too warm, and her wet shoes left small dark prints like evidence no one wanted to acknowledge. In the security room, 6 monitors glowed blue over a metal desk. Camera feeds showed empty hallways, locked gates, the kitchen corridor, the staff lockers, the rain shining under floodlights. Elena sat on the edge of a folding chair with a towel around her shoulders, her knees angled inward because the room had not been built for women who took up space. A young guard placed hot coffee beside her and immediately looked embarrassed, as if kindness had slipped out by accident. Dante stood behind the chair opposite her. He did not sit. Malcolm stood too close to the monitors. Elena noticed because men only stood too close to things they wanted to control. "Show 8 to 8:05, Dante said. The technician tapped the keyboard. The footage jumped to the staff locker hall. Elena appeared on screen, opening her locker, removing the yellow envelope, turning when Malcolm entered with 2 guards.
No audio. No struggle.
Then the feed froze for half a second, blurred, and resumed with her already backed against the lockers, one hand wrapped around her wrist. Dante leaned forward slightly. "Rewind." The technician did. Again the same half-second blur. Malcolm sighed. "Compression glitch. It happens in storms." Elena looked at camera 2's timestamp. Her mouth went dry. "That's not storm damage." Malcolm turned to her with polished patience.
Elena.
The way he said her name made the guard with the coffee look down. "You are tired. You are wet. You are pregnant. No reasonable person expects perfect recall." She pressed the towel tighter around herself, then lifted one shaking finger toward the screen. The hallway clock says 8:02. The camera timestamp says 8:04. That camera runs slow, not fast. It's never ahead. Dante did not praise her. He did not comfort her. He looked at the monitor as if it had just insulted him in his own house. "How do you know?" "Because I clean this room on Thursdays. The technician complains about it every week. He says camera 2 is always 1 minute and 40 seconds behind after server maintenance." The technician stopped typing. Malcolm's hand moved toward his phone, then stopped halfway when Dante looked at him. Tiny movement. Almost nothing. "Enough," Dante said. "Hands where I can see them." The room went still. On the lower monitor, camera 4 showed the gate from outside.
Then.
Headlights.
Elena falling.
But in the corner of the frame, reflected in the wet black paint of Dante's SUV, there was another shape near the service awning. Malcolm, holding a second keycard he had already claimed was lost. The second keycard existed for less than a second in the reflection, but it changed the temperature of the room. Malcolm still looked composed, still dry, still standing with the sorrowful patience of a man forced to manage someone else's mess. Dante said nothing. He only turned his phone face down on the metal desk, the screen still holding the frozen image from the SUV's wet black paint. The silence made the fluorescent lights sound louder. Then the door opened, and Evelyn Cross entered with a cream-colored folder pressed against her ribs. She was the Moretti family attorney, narrow as a blade, wearing a camel coat that probably cost more than Elena's hospital deposit. Her eyes moved over Elena's wet dress, her swollen stomach, the towel slipping from one shoulder, and settled there half a second too long. "Mr. Moretti," Evelyn said, soft and careful. "Before this becomes something larger than it needs to be, I recommend we document Ms. Harper's voluntary resignation." Malcolm's relief was almost invisible. Almost. Elena felt the room tilt smaller around her. Security room. Folding chair.
Wet shoes.
Rich people standing. Her body, her pregnancy, her grief, all arranged like inconveniences on a table. Evelyn placed a printed statement in front of her and uncapped a silver pen. "No one is accusing you publicly, Elena. That is a kindness. Sign this, return all household materials, and the family will provide 2 weeks severance." She glanced at Elena's stomach again, this time with professional pity sharpened into a point. "Given your condition, stability would be wise." Elena looked at the paper. It said she had removed confidential property, suffered emotional distress, and misunderstood standard exit procedure. It said she apologized for disrupting the household. The old words rose in her throat.
"I'm sorry."
They were ready, trained, waiting. Her fingers touched the cracked name tag still pinned crookedly to her apron. Harper. Not problem. Not liability. Harper. She straightened it with 2 wet fingers before she spoke. I won't sign a lie. Evelyn's expression did not change, which made it worse. This is not a courtroom. Then why does it need my confession? For the first time, Dante looked at Elena instead of the evidence. Not with trust. With attention. Malcolm stepped closer, voice dipped in velvet. Elena, you are exhausted. You have had a frightening night. A woman under this much stress can misread ordinary events. No one will think less of you if you accept help. The humiliation was quiet enough to be legal. That was its power. The technician stared at his keyboard. The guard who had brought coffee swallowed hard. Elena picked up the receipt with the 2 coffees and the blueberry muffin and laid it flat beside the resignation form. Then she placed the hospital tag beside it. Ask me the times. Evelyn blinked. Excuse me? Ask me what time the receipt printed. Ask me what time the hospital tag says he was discharged. Ask me what time your form says I was fired. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Dante's voice came low from behind them. Answer her. No one moved. Elena did. She tapped each item once. 10:58. 11:42. 7:56. Then she looked at Malcolm. You're the one who taught me the house runs on records. Malcolm gave a small, wounded smile, as if disappointed by her lack of gratitude. Records can be misunderstood. Dante picked up Evelyn's folder and turned to the last page. The signature line waited blank, but the document footer showed the file had been created at 7:41 p.m., 22 minutes before Malcolm claimed he discovered the envelope. The footer timestamp sat at the bottom of the resignation form like a thumbprint left by arrogance. 7:41 p.m., 22 minutes before Malcolm had walked into the locker room. 19 minutes before Elena had touched the yellow envelope. Dante did not react. That was the worst part. He did not accuse. He did not raise his voice. He simply placed the paper back on the desk so carefully that the sound of it touching metal made Evelyn Cross stop breathing through her nose. Malcolm adjusted his cuff. Administrative templates are often prepared in advance, he said, especially when an employee has displayed concerning behavior. Elena looked at him then, really looked. His tie was perfect. His shoes were dry. His face was calm. But his right thumb kept rubbing the side of his index finger, the same way it had the night Miles died when he told her not to mention seeing blood by the freezer door. She reached for the yellow envelope. Evelyn's hand moved first, quick and elegant. That remains household property. Elena pulled it back against her chest. Not fast. Not rude. Final. No, she said. This is my husband's. The room tightened around the word husband. Widows made rich people uncomfortable when they could not turn them into charity. She opened the envelope herself, using 2 fingers because the plastic seam had split from the rain. The first thing she took out was not the USB, not the key card. It was the old phone, wrapped in a cloth napkin from the staff dining room, the corner embroidered with the Moretti crest. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and dried brown residue stained the edge near the charging port. Dante's eyes dropped to that stain and stayed there 1 second too long. It hasn't turned on in months, Elena said. But Miles told me not to throw it away. Malcolm exhaled like a man indulging grief. A broken phone is not evidence. Then it won't hurt to look. She said it quietly, but the sentence landed harder than if she had shouted. The technician brought a charger. For a moment nothing happened. Rain tapped the high window. Somewhere down the hall, a cart wheel squeaked over marble. Elena kept both hands folded, under her stomach so no one would see how badly they shook. Then the phone vibrated once. The screen lit up with a dead man's name still saved as home. No one spoke. Dante leaned in, not close enough to touch it, just close enough to see. One missed voicemail. 7 months old. Malcolm's face did not change, but Evelyn looked at him before she looked at the phone. Dante noticed. Elena did too. The technician pressed play. Static filled the room first, thick and broken. Then Miles Harper's voice came through, faint, breathless, as if each word had been dragged over glass. Ellie, if they say I stole, don't believe it. Take the yellow envelope to Moretti. Not his people. Him. Elena closed her eyes. Not to cry. To stay standing inside herself. The voicemail crackled, swallowed half a sentence, then returned with a metallic hum behind it. The card opens lower server. The contract page was switched. He made me sign after. Static cut the name away. Malcolm moved then, just one step. This is deeply unfortunate, he said, voice lower now, kinder in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. But a dying man under stress may say many things. We do not know when that recording was made, where it was made, or whether Ms. Harper has altered it. Dante did not look at the phone anymore. He looked at Malcolm. You said he died at the warehouse. That is what the report states. Listen again. The technician replayed the voicemail. This time Dante lifted one hand before the words began. Not the voice. The background. They all listened. Static. Breathing. The metallic hum. Then, faint beneath Miles's broken words, a bell rang twice, thin and cold. Elena opened her eyes. That's not the warehouse, she whispered. That's the freezer alarm behind the private kitchen. It rings like that when the door stays open more than 30 seconds. Malcolm smiled, but the smile had lost its warmth. You clean kitchens, Elena. You hear kitchen sounds everywhere. Dante's gaze did not move from him. Miles Harper was never cleared for the private kitchen. Malcolm answered too quickly. No, sir. The phone buzzed again in the technician's hand, pulling up an unsent text saved in drafts. For words filled the cracked screen, addressed to Dante Moretti's private number, a number Elena had never known existed. Malcolm has your signature. Malcolm has your signature. The 4 words stayed on the cracked screen after the voicemail ended, bright and small and impossible to soften. Dante did not touch the phone. He looked at it the way a surgeon looks at the first spot of infection, not afraid of it, not surprised by blood, only aware that the cut had gone deeper than anyone in the room understood. Rain tapped the high glass above the security monitors. The dishwasher hummed somewhere behind the private kitchen, steady and ordinary, washing plates from a dinner no one would remember while a dead man's last warning sat on a metal desk. Elena wrapped both arms around herself, not because she was cold, though she was, but because her body had learned to hold itself together before anyone else offered to. Evelyn Cross recovered first. That number could have been entered by anyone, she said. A draft is not a sent message. It proves intention at most, not fact. Dante's eyes lifted. Good. Evelyn paused. Good. Then facts won't scare you. He turned to the technician. Lower server access. 7 months ago. Night Harper died. Malcolm's face remained calm, but his thumb started rubbing again. The technician typed. Lines of entry logs crawled across the monitor. Badge numbers, door codes, timestamps, names. Dante watched without blinking.
Elena Waked Malcolm.
That was the difference between powerful men and maids. Powerful men watched screens. Maids watched hands, cuffs, keys, sweat at the hairline, the tiny flinch when a lie came close to heat. The first log showed Miles Harper entering the lower server hall at 10:31 p.m. using temporary audit access. The second showed him exiting at 11:08. Then, at 11:19, another entry appeared. Malcolm Voss, private kitchen corridor. Same key card class. I was conducting a compliance sweep, Malcolm said before anyone asked. Dante did not look at him. I didn't ask. Silence took the room by the throat. The technician clicked again. A contract file opened, scanned and archived under Dante's authorization. Page 9 had been replaced 3 days after Miles died. Not amended. Replaced. The digital approval carried Dante Moretti's signature in black ink, elegant and practiced. Elena saw Dante's expression change by almost nothing. His jaw did not tighten. His hand did not curl. But the air around him lost warmth. Print both versions. The printer in the corner woke with a dry mechanical cough. Paper slid out 1 page at a time. Ordinary white paper. Ordinary black ink. The kind of thing people signed, filed, forgot, and used to ruin lives. Elena took one step forward, then stopped herself. "I don't want money," she said. So quietly the technician looked up. "If this is about severance or settlement, I don't want it." Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Ms. Harper, no one has offered you a settlement." "Good." Elena placed one hand over the baby, the other on the yellow envelope. "I want my husband's name written down correctly. He didn't steal. He didn't run. And I want my child to know his father wasn't what your report said he was." Something moved behind Dante's eyes then, but he locked it away before it became mercy. Mercy was too easy. Mercy could be mistaken for weakness. He reached for the 2 printed pages and held them side by side. Same contract, same clause. One number changed. A routing number, buried in the final paragraph, sending warehouse insurance payouts through a shell account attached to household compliance. Malcolm gave a sad little breath. "Sir, with respect, Mr. Harper had access to those accounts. It is possible he created the diversion and then panicked." Dante finally turned to him. "Possible." Malcolm nodded once, grateful for the word. Dante placed the original page on top of the altered one. "Except this signature is mine from the Santos dock lease." Evelyn went still. Malcolm stopped rubbing his thumb. Dante looked back at the screen, where the archived approval glowed beneath his stolen name, and his voice dropped so low Elena barely heard it. "I signed that lease in Chicago, 2 years before Harper ever worked here." No one moved. No one breathed. Dante stared at Malcolm as if seeing, for the first time, the shape of a man who had been standing beside him. For years, and in that silence Elena understood the coldest discovery of all. The Mafia boss had not been blind because he lacked eyes, but because he had trusted the wrong pair. Dante let Malcolm believe the room had cooled in his favor. That was the first trap. He placed the altered contract face down on the desk, slid the old phone back toward Elena, and said, "We finish this in the morning." Malcolm's shoulders lowered by less than an inch. Evelyn Cross glanced at him, then away. Elena saw both movements because servants survived by reading what powerful people tried not to say. Dante turned to the technician. "Restore camera 4. Full maintenance report on my desk by 7 o'clock. Then he looked at Malcolm. "You'll prepare the termination packet again. Clean copy. Every attachment." Malcolm nodded, almost grateful. "Of course, sir. I'll make sure it is accurate." Elena felt the air sharpen around the word. Accurate. Dante did not smile. "Do that." 15 minutes later, the mansion looked normal from the outside. Hallway lights glowed amber against polished wood. Rain slid down the tall windows. Somewhere in the private dining room, an untouched glass of red wine sat beside Dante's plate, dark as a wound no one had opened yet. But underneath the quiet, the house had changed shape. The library became a command room. Luca, Dante's consigliere, arrived without asking questions, his coat still wet at the collar. A private forensic accountant opened payroll records on one laptop. The technician copied backup footage on another. Elena stood near the door, wrapped in a dry staff cardigan that did not close over her stomach, holding the yellow envelope with both hands. Dante noticed her still standing. "Sit." It was not gentle. It was not rude. It was a fact. She sat on the edge of a leather chair too expensive to trust herself in. Luca spread 6 printed logs across the table. Badge access, kitchen deliveries, freezer maintenance, staff shift changes, payroll adjustments, and medical transport invoices from the night Miles died. Dante did not ask Elena to tell her story again. He asked smaller things. Who carried keys on the left side?
Elena blinked.
What? You. Watched people. Who carried keys on the left? She closed her eyes for a second, not to remember Miles, but to walk the old hallway in her mind. Malcolm. Always left. He said right pockets ruined the line of his jacket. Luca's pen stopped. Dante lifted one sheet. The report says a junior guard opened the freezer corridor. Right-handed. Card reader on the left wall. Elena looked at the diagram. Then he would have crossed his body to scan. Malcolm wouldn't. He'd do it smooth. Dante's eyes moved once toward Luca. The trap tightened. At 1:16 a.m., Dante called Malcolm back to the library. Not urgently, politely. That made it worse. Malcolm entered with the clean termination packet, every attachment aligned, every clip squared. He saw Elena in the chair and paused only long enough to hide his anger inside concern. Ms. Harper should be resting. Elena kept her hands on the envelope. I am. Dante gestured to the table. Walk me through the timeline. Malcolm did beautifully. Too beautifully. He placed Elena at the lockers at 8:03, himself in the compliance office at 8:04, guards at the gate by 8:09, form filed at 8:17. He never once looked at the badge log. Elena listened until he said, I was not near the private kitchen that evening. Then she lifted her head. You smelled like lemon oil. Malcolm turned slowly. Excuse me? The private kitchen doors were polished that night. I remember because I did them. Lemon oil sticks to wool. The room went silent. Dante reached for Malcolm's coat, draped over the chair by the door. Malcolm's hand stopped on the brass knob. Sir, surely we are not treating household cleaning products as evidence. Dante slipped one hand into the left pocket and pulled out a receipt that had slid behind the lining. Folded twice, old and soft at the edges. 2 black coffees. 1 blueberry muffin. 10:58 p.m. Malcolm stared at it, and for the first time all night, he looked not at Dante, not at Luca, but at Elena. That was when he understood she was no longer outside the gate. Malcolm looked at Elena the way men look at locked doors after hearing the key turn from the other side. For 1 second, his face forgot how to be kind. Then it returned smooth and wounded, but too late. Dante had already seen the fracture. Morning came gray and cold, with rain still clinging to the iron gate in silver threads. Every employee was called to the service entrance, not the ballroom, not the boardroom, not the room with the oil portraits and velvet chairs. The gate, the same wet stone where Elena's suitcase had split open. Drivers stood beside housekeepers. Guards stood beside kitchen staff. Evelyn Cross stood with her folder held tighter than before. Malcolm stood under the awning, exactly where he had stood the night before, dry, composed, almost offended by the inconvenience of truth. Elena stood on the other side of the folding table, wearing a borrowed coat over her damp uniform, the yellow envelope beneath one hand. Dante placed each item on the table without explanation. The hospital tag, the old phone, the receipt, the second key card, the altered contract, and finally the torn apron sealed in clear plastic. Dark blood marked the fabric near the pocket, not across the front where a kitchen injury would fall, but inside the fold, where a dying man's hand had grabbed it. Malcolm's voice was gentle enough to make the lie sound responsible. Mr. Moretti, with respect, this display may create unnecessary distress for staff. Dante did not look at him. Good. The word moved through the crowd like cold water. Luca connected a laptop to the portable screen near the guard booth. The first footage appeared grainy and blue. The private kitchen corridor, 7 months earlier, 11:37 p.m. Miles Harper stumbled into frame, one hand on the wall, shirt dark at the ribs. Elena appeared behind him in a maid's apron. Younger by grief she did not yet know was coming. She reached for him. He pressed something into her apron pocket. The old phone. On screen, Malcolm entered next, not surprised, not alarmed. He bent near Miles, removed a black folder from inside Miles's jacket, and looked straight at the camera before the feed cut. No one spoke. Even the rain seemed to soften so it could hear. Elena's fingers curled around the edge of the table, but she did not look away. Play the backup audio, she said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Luca clicked. Static first. Then Malcolm's voice, calm and close to the hidden maintenance recorder Elena had once asked not to be thrown out, because it still worked. You should have taken the money, Miles. Miles gasped something no microphone could save. Then Malcolm again, sharper. Moretti signs what I place in front of him. That is the beauty of trust. Dante went still. Not angry. Worse. Empty for one terrible second. As if a part of him had stepped backward inside his own body. He looked at the gate, at the staff, at Elena's swollen stomach, at the bloody apron he had never known existed under his roof. His face lost color slowly. The most feared man in the city could not speak because the truth had not attacked him from outside. It had lived in his house, used his name, and thrown a pregnant widow into the rain. Malcolm finally moved. That recording is inadmissible without chain of custody. Elena lifted the yellow envelope. Then start with this. She slid out the original contract page Miles had folded behind the hospital bill, still bearing Dante's real signature from the Santos dock lease and the routing number before it was changed. Evelyn Cross took one look and closed her eyes. The crowd understood before anyone explained. Dante picked up the bloody apron, held it for one breath, then set it down in front of Malcolm like a sentence already passed. He turned to Luca, voice flat and quiet. "Call my attorney, then lock the gate. No one leaves." Luca's phone was already at his ear when the gate locked behind the staff. No one ran. No one dared to. Malcolm stood beside the folding table with the bloody apron in front of him. His face arranged into dignity, but dignity could not cover the tremor in his left hand. By noon, Dante's attorney had the original contract, the altered routing page, the key card logs, the hospital records, the backup footage, and the maintenance recorder sealed in evidence bags. By 2 o'clock, Malcolm Voss was no longer director of household compliance. By 4 o'clock, every access code he had ever issued was dead. The police came without sirens. That was somehow worse. They did not drag him. They did not need to. Malcolm walked out through the same gate where he had watched Elena kneel in the rain, and not one person under the awning looked away this time. Dante made them stay for the rest. Not for humiliation, for correction. Evelyn Cross read the amended record aloud. Miles Harper had not stolen from the Moretti estate. He had discovered fraud. Elena Harper had not removed household property. She had preserved evidence. Her termination was void. Her personnel file would be corrected, her unpaid wages restored, her health insurance reinstated retroactively, and all medical bills tied to the night's negligence covered through the estate's legal fund. Not as charity, but as liability accepted. Elena stood with both hands resting over her stomach, listening to her own name return to her piece by piece. Harper. Witness. Widow. Employee. Woman. Not problem. Not liability. Dante did not hand her cash. He handed her paperwork with signatures already witnessed by counsel. Independent legal protection, safe housing for the duration of the investigation, maternity leave with full pay, and a new office created outside household compliance where any staff member could bring evidence directly to the executive board. Then he faced the employees. His voice did not rise. This house taught people to be silent when silence benefited power. That ends today. No one clapped. It would have been too small for what had happened. A kitchen maid began crying into her sleeve. The young guard who had brought Elena coffee stared at his shoes. Dante turned back to Elena. For the first time, the most feared man in the city looked afraid of one simple thing: being forgiven too easily. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "I saw the gate. I did not see the house." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she placed the yellow envelope on the table between them. Its edges were warped from rain, its plastic scarred, its purpose complete. "Then keep looking," she said. 3 weeks later, the service entrance had a new camera, but also a new sign beside it. Staff Integrity Office, open 24 hours. The gate no longer opened only from the inside. Elena's new badge arrived in a small white box, printed correctly in dark letters. Elena Harper, Witness Protection Liaison. She kept Miles's old phone in her desk drawer, charged now, not because she needed to hear the voicemail again, but because truth deserved a place where no one could throw it away. That evening, after the last meeting ended, Dante found her in the quiet staff kitchen. A clean apron hung on the hook beside her chair. A hot cup of coffee sat in front of her, untouched but steaming. Outside, the iron gate stood open beneath the soft gold lamps. Elena lifted the cup with both hands, felt the baby move once, and said without lowering her eyes, "I'm not sorry I came back." Dante said nothing, and in that silence, the whole house finally listened.